Hello, iSpark family, Fit Nation family, honor your health, and of course, I run walk and everything in between because we've got lots of overlap. So if you're listening to the recorded version, I'm glad you're taking the time. And at this point, we have so many different kind of stages that everybody's at in their programming. Some of you in I Run Walk have completed a 13-week program or an 8-week program. Some of you have had interruptions, and so you're maybe midway through. Some of you are looking for some motivation to actually make a start because we'll be moving forward with more programming and support, leading us towards National Indigenous Peoples Day, which is of course June 21st. So that's a couple months from now. And I just personally got back from a run myself on a rainy day, but I felt so jazzed, as I always do. And I wasn't super psyched to start. I thought, oh, I really should get out. I'm feeling a little blah. But once again, I was reminded how great it feels to be active. So today, too, thinking about all of you all around the province, our topic today is really about, keeping that fire alive. What do we do in life? What do we do to stay motivated and stay active? And to help with what I do know to be true internally is my dear friend and colleague over many years, Run Walk leader, founder of the Habit Shift Institute. It's Larry Burkhead, and that's Larry right there on the screen. Good morning, and thank you for joining me. So what I love about Larry and I've known each other for a long time and have enjoyed many conversations around just what it takes to really, dig into change in your life. And in this case, we talk about activity, bringing activity into one's life and sticking with a program. And, just why is it that cognitively it can be so difficult? Intrinsically, we know, but to make it happen, can be difficult. This we also know is that I'm not saying anything we don't cognitively understand. Exercise is medicine. We all agree. That's why you're listening. That's why you've embarked on one of the many program opportunities. And we know it makes us feel good. We know it helps us inside and out, mind, body, and spirit. And we know at this time especially that aerobic activity especially will help boost the immune system during this COVID craziness time. So we're maintaining physical distance, we're washing hands, we're doing all that we can to stay healthy. And one of those things is, of course, to be active on a daily basis. So having said that, then it would seem simple. And that's where Larry comes in, because I come back from a run, I'm all jazzed. I go, what is it that can sometimes be difficult? How do we, and even now, Larry, this is where we're going to go with this. How do we find a way to stay motivated and strong, through this time of adversity? We understand in the power of positive thinking. You out there, my leaders, our leaders, our participants, we have that power. How do we truly, tap into that power?
Want to pick that up here?
I do.
Okay.
I'm psyched. I'm thinking, what is our capacity? How do we manage this? And I love, yes, I love to banter because, uh, Larry, you can talk about these things that we've been discussing over really many years now.
Yeah, so the challenge is doubled with the virus and all the constraints of the virus. And when there's often a big enough challenge just keeping an active life going under normal circumstances. And I suppose, I live right along the Arbutus corridor. And I just saw this morning that there's a huge spike in bike sales.
Oh,
And I could testify from watching the Arbutus corridor pathway behind where I live in Vancouver. There are, well, not today, but up until today, there were dozens and dozens of cyclists going by every hour.
mm-hmm.
So I know people were getting out. So uh, but it's kind of like they're off work, so they have time to get out. So it's kind of a double-edged sword there.
It is, and managing time has always been one of those barriers that it takes for people to stick to a program. For sure, there are more people being active
Absolutely.
out there right now.
Yeah, yeah, because they don't have the competition from having to go into work, which is good, but also I'm sure for a lot of reasons people would rather be going into work. In any case, the challenge is John Kabat-Zinn wrote a book about meditation called Wherever You Go, There You Are.
Mm.
And here we are. And we're under times of additional stress. And so I thought, Lynn and I were thinking that it made a lot of sense to talk about how people who handle adversity well, what do they do to handle adversity well? And so we're going to go over some of the things that people who are strong in times of adversity and what they do, so that the people listening and watching this can compare what the skills that they've developed over time, and whether or not they can develop, whether, well, they might have some of these skills for managing adversity, but they also might begin focusing on some of the things that people who do manage adversity well, and they can begin using those same skills themselves.
And as always, we are inspired by one another. So we need to support one another at times like these, and always.
So each of these elements are things that people who deal with adversity well manage. And I have a question for each of these dimensions. So this isn't based on laboratory research. This is based upon what people do who seem to be able to thrive during adversity. All of us have known these people. It's often at work or in community settings where we run into people who, in spite of the world falling down around us, seem to still have a way to manage themselves through it. And I know in my life, I've been really attracted to those people. When my world is just kind of going nuts, they feel stable, they feel constant, they feel like they know where they're going. So here are the four elements. It's called control, ownership, reach, and endurance. And the primary question for control is, do you believe that you can influence outcomes? And some people feel like they cannot. Other people do feel like they can make a decision about how to respond. So another way to ask this question is, do you believe you can manage your response to events? Do you believe you can choose to respond immediately and spontaneously, or do you choose to delay your response for some better time? A great example of, a lot of people know the serenity prayer that people in AA use, and which is, grant me the serenity to accept things I cannot change, courage to change things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what this issue is about. Lynn, anything strike you with that?
Just again, you put words to what I feel inside, and it's 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 something I've shared with people in times of stress and adversity, if you will. Just that if you could only just remove some distractions and focus on what you can do. So
Right.
that is taking control. And there, cup half full versus not so full, and it's much nicer to have a cup half full, and it's a positive experience.
Yeah, if people think that they want to uh, be able to change as opposed to influence, we're not in total control. You notice this isn't saying, okay, change the world. This is just saying, like Lynn just said, how do you parse out the things that you can influence,
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily control? And I think people who, I know we all wish that we could control more, but the fact is that we're very limited in what we absolutely can control. And in fact, one of the key disruptors in personal relationships is when you decide you can control somebody else, and that ain't going to work.
That's not going to happen.
No, you can influence, but you can't totally control. The second element then is ownership. This element says, regardless of the situation, do you see how you might be able to take it upon yourself to improve the situation? But here's the kicker. Regardless of the cause, regardless of the idiot next door that did it, regardless of the circumstances that are upon us through the virus, regardless of what the government is saying or not saying,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of all those other things,
Mm-hmm.
resilient people see how that they can, okay, forget all the things I'd like to have happen or all the anger I feel. What can we do to improve the situation, because it's on me to do it. And so that's what ownership is all about. Do you feel like you can take ownership?
Well, and in this time of restriction and stress, if you will, we can choose to focus on all the things that we cannot do, or we can figure out what can we do. And this webinar, if you will, is focused on the life situation, but also the activity component, the movement component. And so if we break it into smaller steps, sometimes it's easier um, to to take ownership and control, if you will. And even something, folks that are in the Indigenous Run Walk program, when there's that time when you're tired and you don't really feel like doing it on a day, and we've tried to give you examples of just one step at a time. So all you have to do actually is get your running and walking clothes on and walk out the door. And today you're just going to do the warm up. Just start walking, do a 5-minute warm up, and just get some fresh air. And then the next thing you know, more happens. All of a sudden, okay, I'll go a little further. All right, maybe I will do that brisk interval. So it pulls back into our sort of activity world when you focus on such things as what you can control and take ownership of what you can do.
Yeah, and there's no better way of proving to yourself that you can influence the situation positively by getting out there and making advancements in your fitness program. If you focus just on what can't be changed, that's a downward spiral. It
Right.
really is. That can lead to a lot of unpleasant feelings and thoughts. So proving to yourself that no matter how small, if you can exert influence in a positive regard on situation, regardless of who caused it, it's not your fault. Nobody's fault necessarily, but it feels a whole lot better to feel like you can claim something in your life that you can move forward positively. So the next element is reach. This one I think everybody will identify with. It's when there's adversity in one part of your life and how you may let that bleed into other areas of your life. The typical situation is when you have a tough time, a tough day at work, do you come home and take it out on the dog?
No, I'm fine, thanks.
And so the idea here is that people who handle adversity well, who can maintain resilience, contain the oil spill, if that's an
Mm-hmm.
apt metaphor. They contain the oil spill and keep it from spreading to all the other parts of the ground that are in a person's life. And so it's hard sometimes because when we're in under a lot of stress and we're in a tough situation, we begin spinning anger and
Mm-hmm.
frustration around in our environment to the people around us. And that's really unfair to them. And they can't figure out why that has anything to do with them. And of course it doesn't.
Right.
It's our challenge to contain it, to keep the adversity we're feeling contained into the part of our life where it belongs, and sort of set it aside and then deal with everybody else, including the dog, on
Mm-hmm.
fairer terms.
Oh, and of course we can all relate to that very situation. I mean, I personally had one yesterday with my daughter at home, and you know, just something happened that I had to cope with, and I was feeling stressed about something else. And it just, what I know to be true is if I take a breath, don't respond, and go outside, whether it's a walk, whether it's a run, some kind of activity, a way to relieve some stress, then you just handle the details of such a situation so much better.
Yep, absolutely. It's breaking the state, right? Because we can get. I find if I'm at home too much alone and not talking to people, even virtually, I kind of spiral inward, and it doesn't do my mental health any good. I have to engage, I have to connect, I have to think outside of my own emotions and situation. And that all of a sudden, if it's playing music, even if it's just breaking my mental state by watching a YouTube clip or whatever, it breaks that state where I feel like I'm just wrapped around some axle someplace and not being able to get out. The final ingredient then here, and again, these are things that people who are resilient, who manage adversity well, the things that they do, and you can sort of ask yourself if you do these things as well. So the final one is endurance, and people think, I mean, it's just so appropriate to the circumstances of the pandemic. But even without the pandemic, people sometimes think that the feelings that they're having right now are a life sentence.
Mhm.
That the current depression or the current joy or the current difficulty, the current resistance we feel, the current lack of control, the shrinking of our world, we tend to think that that's going to last forever. Well, people who are good at dealing are good at creating resilience and dealing with adversity know, and we have seen this. I mean, I've just about every newscast I've watched about the pandemic, everybody's saying, particularly the politicians, because they want the good news, right? They're saying this will not last forever. Now, it might last a year, right, before a
Mhm.
vaccine is available, which is not something we can control. I don't know that we can even influence the vaccine. No, I can't influence it. I'm
Oh, I
somebody
think,
else is influencing that.
and we're so dependent on that happening.
Right.
It's
We're
out of our
hoping.
control.
Exactly. But we do believe, I do believe that this will not last forever. It will be tough.
Mhm.
And it may be tough for a while, but it won't last forever. Or at least here's another way to look at it is whatever gets you down now may not last forever. It may be only the thing that doesn't last forever is your feelings,
Mhm.
right? Maybe since the world has shrunk so much and we can't control so much, all that can change is the fact that we are feeling better, that we've done something with our own mind and managed to control some of our thoughts and feelings.
Mhm. And again, I love the way that you put words to these things that I do experience. And so what came to mind for me just now is that I know that in times of stress, personally, I've learned, and maybe I'm not sure where this fits in with core here exactly, but again, I have to break things into small bits that I can grab onto that are going to be positive. And sometimes it means that in such a situation like this pandemic, or even in just an overwhelming time in one's life, to think too far ahead or to be,
Mm.
into the future becomes something personally I can't handle. So I will think literally the best thing is to live almost in the moment. And what can I do right in this moment? Well, I'm going to brush my teeth. Okay, that's a good thing. I'm moving forward. There we go. Like that is my way of coping with tough scenarios. So
Yeah, I've
what?
actually, that's been a point I've made at the leader training day is when you look at a potential action and when you say to yourself, I can do that,
Mhm.
that ends up to be a tremendously motivating. And the way to achieve that is exactly the process you described, which is you chunk it down to the smallest possible piece where you can say, that I can control.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that makes us feel so much better.
Okay. So that does lead us into what we've sort of moved through different stages, Larry. People that have, even in the Run Walk program, with the Honor Your Health Challenge, with Fit Nation, people have taken new programs into their lives for various reasons. And I love it. It takes a lot to really bring change into one's life. Now, what's the best way for me to move this slide? Should I put the whole thing up there or?
Yeah, you might as well put
Okay,
every.
because then we can talk to it. So this
Yeah, we
is
can
the
talk to the whole spectrum.
sure. And we're hoping to get, like, our topic today overall is, come on, folks, let's, given all of the circumstances and the opportunities that we've got and the support we've got, let's keep the fire alive. And not all of us are there, though. Not all of us are there.
No, so this is a model that was developed about 30 years ago. And again, what I like about this is it's not laboratory research. This is predicated on tens of thousands of interviews that were done with people who managed to self-motivate. And that's really what we need, right? When I do a talk at a Sunrun, I usually get introduced as a motivational speaker. And I've been disavowing that in my first 5 minutes. I always hope I'm not a demotivational speaker, but it's for people to think that motivation is that it's going to be injected into them from a speaker is kind of self-sacrifice. It's really it's not self-destructive, but it certainly isn't helpful because
Mhm.
I can't motivate anybody. All Lynn and I can do is present information to people and they go, oh, that's interesting. I can do that. Well, that made sense to me. And what they do is they begin to kindle the fire inside themselves. But that fire and the kindling of it is going to be done by everybody listening and watching this rather than something that I can inject. I mean, after all, if
Mhm.
I could inject motivation and inject the power to overcome resistance into
Oh,
people, well, my pay grade would be a whole lot higher.
I need some of that injection too. That it's a very difficult thing to be trying to provide tools to stay motivated when we all personally experience such things in the same way. So we can figure out how to tap into that energy, though, Larry. That's the
So here's the thinking process for this. What's wrong with staying the same? And this is a key component. What's wrong with sitting on the couch rather than going out and getting exercise? And everybody will have their own answer to that.
Mhm.
And everybody that gets off the couch and goes out and exercise had to think about that. Now, it might not have been conscious, right? It could have been entirely unconscious. But at some point in each of our brains, for us to move and to get out and be active, we had to say, there's something wrong with my sitting here for the rest of the day. I don't like that. Or maybe what I don't like about that will show up next week or next month, but there's something wrong. And if I don't get out and be active, then I don't like the result. Conversely, if I stay stationary, I I get something that I don't want to have anymore,
Mhm.
whether it's poor health, whether it's poor mental health, physical health, where it's increased weight, whatever it may be. So that's the first step.
Mhm.
What's wrong? If there's nothing wrong, why bother?
Right.
Nobody in their right mind is going to answer the question, there's nothing wrong, and go out and do something different.
Mhm.
Second stage is that's when we say, what's wrong? We go, oh, that's what's wrong.
Mm.
That's
That's
what,
why I should do it.
that's why I should do it.
Mhm.
And, and that reason, there's always going to be resistance. There's always going to be some sort of resistance, even if it's just, like you said earlier, Lynn, time.
Mhm.
That's the problem. And once I identify that, that has to be strong enough in our gut to overcome what is also in our gut, which is I'd sure like to stay here on the couch,
Yes.
right? So when we weigh these two, here's the problem that I get to keep if I don't do anything.
Mhm.
And here's the problem with going out. Once I decide that the problem with staying the same is greater than the challenge of getting out and being active, then we get out and be active. So then we start thinking, okay, what am I going to do? And
Mhm.
this is probably where a lot of us are right now is we're thinking, okay, how do this is new circumstances. And when new circumstances arise, we all have to re-ready ourselves. In essence, we have to get ready again.
Mhm.
Okay, this is a new challenge. These are new schedule. People are unemployed. I'm doing different things now.
Mhm.
My family is doing different things. So how do I adjust, I guess is what I'm saying. How do I adjust and get ready again to keep my fitness goals alive?
Mm-hmm. That makes me smile because, and Susan's there too, but this is what we do. We got folks on the couch, so they're quite happy on the couch, and then along comes Coach Lynn and Susan with yet another run walk
Oh
program.
man.
Now,
Oh
oh,
man.
do I have to? Maybe I should. Maybe I will. And we do have another program coming.
Yeah. And the question is always is, whether it's conscious or not, what's wrong with staying the same?
Hmm.
And the people who grab on are the people who've identified, oh, that's the problem if I stay the same. I better start paying attention to do something. And then once we find that reason, and that's where the motivation is. It's
Hmm.
not it's not what I've said. It's when people say there's a problem if I don't do something, and the problem of not doing something is smaller than the problem I'm going to get if I'm not active. That's a bigger problem than getting out and being active. So
Hmm.
that's always the thing we're thinking about, always. Not, and even, you know, even people that have been running for decades. It's a
Oh,
rainy
sure.
day, or it's snowing, or it's icy, or whatever. It's still, well, if I don't do it, what prize do I get for not doing it? And eventually that prize ends up being negative, right? For being inactive. So we
Right.
reach the go stage, and the go stage is get out of my frickin' way. You
We're
or
doing this.
and the horse you rode in on, you aren't stopping me. This is going to happen. I heard, I was working with one person in a Sunrun clinic a few years ago, and she said, "This is non-negotiable." That's how she thought of it in her brain. She thought, "No, no, no. Being active and remaining active is non-negotiable. That's not something that's on the discussion. That's not on the table for a vote." And
And we
she locked that into her head, and I thought, yeah, that's really a great way to think of it.
no, and it's true. We suggest, especially in the earlier stages, pencil in that, decide on your 3 days a week and when
Yep,
that's going to be. And,
yep,
that becomes an appointment just the same as any other
yep,
important thing on your calendar.
yep. And finally, keep the fire alive is actually where we spend most of our lives, because the change itself is over a fairly constrained period of time. But then we start being active, and the sun run is over. This is where this one really comes into play. I always ask people, what are you going to do the Sunday after the sun run? Oh, I'm going to sit in bed, and
And go back
and
to
so
back to
even
doing other things I love
that's
to
right,
do.
that's right. Even like if I'm doing a talk in week 2 or 3, I'm saying, what are you going to do the week the sun run is over? Because
Mhm.
people haven't thought that far. A lot of people just haven't even, what? I'm just trying to get my head around being active for the next 13 weeks, let alone what's going to happen after that. But the fact is, there is going to be after that.
Yeah.
And that's its own challenge, because we have to think of how we're going to keep it alive, and how we're going to make here's the good news is, once we get a active embedded habit in our lives, it's just as hard to break. I mean, I
Right.
know, Lynn, if you didn't go out and run, you start going stir crazy,
Hmm.
right? And there's a lot of people that feel that way. I got to get out. And that's when we know that we're keeping the fire alive.
That's it. Yes. But all of this, it just strikes me how it so applies to just life at large, keeping the fire alive. I mean, whether it's around, oh, I don't know, in the household, cooking. I mean, doing something different in your life that it just becomes it can become kind of humdrum unless you jazz it up in some way.
Yep.
So when we figure about, well, here we've talked about a lot of this now. But that's exactly it. And that's what we wanted to get to here as well, is how do we, move forward to keep the fire alive, keep being active, keep our lives, at this in this restricted time, keep things, positive and moving. How do we do that?
That first bullet is something I've been thinking about a lot,
Hmm.
because psychologically, we're now, what would you call, what month are we in here for this disruption? Second month? Third
Right.
month?
I think, well, losing track of time, but it's
So
our second
it's
month. So,
really interesting the language that people use, because people will say, well, when we get back to normal.
right.
Well, that first bullet is the declining pull of old habits. So it's really a curious psychological thing for me, because how long are people going to hang on to that being the old
Normal.
2 months ago being normal?
Mm-hmm.
I think that people who are resilient and adaptive are saying, this is the normal.
Mm-hmm.
And all of that stuff, we don't know if that's going to come back.
Right.
We're not assured that the way it has been is the way it's going to be. So here we are.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm interested to see, and of course there are a lot of things in the press and online, what the new world is going to be like.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm fascinated to see how long this goes on and how long it takes people to say, all right, we'll
Yes.
never be going back to that.
Yeah. What is, I do like to, when the conversation circles around, how are you doing in this new norm? Are you finding you're somehow a little less anxious? There's more of a routine. We know a little
Right,
bit better how to kind of cope within these restrictions, and
right, right.
that's also just keeping things going. So you and I have talked a little bit about some strategies for success in this regard. Uh, we talked about routine,
Yep.
and that comes under that idea of control. Ideally, if you can somehow have a plan for the day, just for the day, maybe for the week. I can't even think beyond myself personally. I don't know how you guys are, but it has to be something in the day. And if I don't have it, a routine or some kind of plan, I really don't have as much of a day that is as sort of comfortable, I guess. That's
I've seen some really interesting stuff come up in the last couple of weeks. There are a number of people who independently have said mealtime,
I think.
set standardized meal times for the whole family,
Mm-hmm.
everybody in the family. Maybe before this you weren't eating together, or you were sitting in front of the telly.
Right.
What this advice was, start this structure, this sense of control, with family eating together at a table and looking at each other,
Oh, and
and using that as an anchor. I
mm-hmm.
thought that made a lot of sense.
It does in life. I mean,
Yeah,
we in the old norm, I mean, think of how hectic, really. There wasn't the time that we have at home for most of us. Those of us, all the essential workers, oh my gosh, thank you, but they're out there. But many of us are definitely leading a less hectic life right now. And so, I mean, with my kids in activities, trying to have a meal time together was actually very difficult to do. And
mm,
so I experience personal gratitude for the fact that we are spending time together that we wouldn't have otherwise. What about the escape? We highlighted that one, Larry. What were we thinking
well,
there?
this is one of those double-edged swords. Usually just watching a movie or listening to some music just to escape, just to break the state of your mind.
Mm-hmm.
It's people should feel that appropriate forms of escape are absolutely a healthy thing to do right now.
Yeah.
And I've been watching more movies, and I don't want to watch documentaries. No documentary. That's not escape. That's real life.
That's
There has
right.
to be moments when I'm just away,
Yeah.
and only moments. Not, this isn't permanent induced coma,
Mm-hmm.
right? This is just saying, okay, tonight I'm going to watch Lord of the Rings.
Right. Formula One for me.
Really?
Oh, I love race cars. That's funny.
Oh, that's interesting.
I know.
A
I
little
know.
slice of Lynn Kanuka's life.
Yeah, there is a story around that, but that's for another time.
Another time.
And healthy food though, Larry, healthy food.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about with meals. Um, we know these, again, intrinsically we know these things, but sometimes it helps to just list them and be cognizant
Yeah.
of them and make good decisions around them. So
And not getting good sleep is just disaster for me.
it
Total
really is.
disaster.
And people are, I, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I really find I'm fine through the day, but if I'm ever going to have any trouble just with an active mind, I guess it can be at night when I wake up. So, and then on those days when I haven't slept well, you know, it's just
Wow.
a different
Huge
day,
difference. Huge difference.
Yes. So we talked about this,
Yep.
learning something new, a new challenge. That's a good idea. I mean, I'm inspired with my student daughters at home here taking classes, and you know, if we can learn something, take on a new, it could be a craft, it could be a language, it could be taking an actual course. It's
You know what a lot of
inspiring
people
to
are
learn.
doing?
Mm.
Apparently flour is selling out
Oh,
because people are
baking.
baking like mad. And I
Yeah.
have never baked in my life, but I saw a
Oh.
recipe for Montreal bagels, Montreal style bagels. And I
Mm-hmm.
made some a couple of days ago, and they look like they are the first time somebody made Montreal bagels, but it was cool. It was great fun. It was,
Yes.
so it fits. It's just learned something new. It was wonderful. It was a lot of fun.
So that's a good idea. We've always talked about, you know, keeping a record or journaling in some way. I think that also is very reinforces, you know, your well-being and just sorts out your thoughts. And sometimes that is not a person's thing, but it can be very motivating to just tap into the thought process and to write things down. And I'm one that's grabbed onto that.
Yeah, it reminds you that it did happen, right? It's like proof.
Mm-hmm.
I love going back to my Apple Watch the prior month and I see all the days where I closed my circles and I go, that's validation. That's proof. I did it.
This is true.
Very
And
reinforcing.
we've always provided a run walk logbook and
Yep.
suggested, you
Yep.
know, record those days that you complete the program, because
That's
then all of a
right.
sudden one day, another day, another day, and the weeks start rolling by. And we've seen ourselves through the winter with this program once again. And we've had folks have completed the You're Not Alone virtual event, which, by the way, you can all still do. Susan, it can be completed as long as right through to end of June, can it not? In Indigenous Peoples Day, yes?
That's correct, yeah. So it is
Awesome.
set until June 30th even. So I know in National Indigenous Peoples Day is on the 21st, but you have until the end of June.
Right. And, you know, everybody listening, whatever program you're in, you can register for 1K, 2K, all the way up to, you know, half marathon. And we, of course, are preparing for overall, if you follow the program, it's either 5K or 10K, depending which program you're following. But you can involve your families in a way that's, you know, right for them, and they can be part of your success as well. And oh, I had to highlight that because our leaders are so concerned about their participants in all of their communities and wanting, you know, feeling, you know, wanting to be that person that really keeps the fire alive for everybody when leaders themselves, of course, have those challenges for themselves personally. So if I just briefly touch on, you know, how you can move forward, perhaps just to give you a little thought process around keeping everything going for the run walk program, the graduates who've completed the program, it's always a big woohoo. You can choose to repeat your program, because that always, you know, you've gone from the couch to 10K or 5K, you know, progressing carefully at a new level of fitness. Now, if you actually repeated the very program that you just completed, just imagine how easy day one will be at the beginning of that program. But your starting point and how you feel is entirely different than was the first time. So to actually repeat it with great success is very, very motivating. Okay. You could choose another program. For example, if you've been a walker and you've decided you'd like to consider Learn to Run, you could do that. Learn to Run, you could decide to run a little bit more and choose the next level of being a Run Stronger participant. Um, Or you can take a break from that structure, and we'll be sending you a maintenance program, which doesn't give you any change of pace intervals. It's just a variety of distances to give you a pattern. And we also have an 8-week starting point now leading up to National Indigenous Peoples Day. So many options there if the running and walking is something you want to stay with. And additionally, why not try, we talked about the You're Not Alone. Okay, so we can realize our goal. And I put that up there because of course I had to do this, and I figured out an app to do it, and it was fun to do. I felt, of course, in my happy place because I love to run, but I thought of everybody out there, all of you out there, and I thought, it feels good to be grateful that we can move in this way, that we can celebrate our health and complete what we started. And I wish for you to have that kind of feeling. I just wish energy in that direction I could spread that for you. But you could try something new if you haven't done this already. We have Fit Nation every Monday, right, Susan? There's a Fit Nation opportunity online on Mondays. And we can certainly figure out a way to get more information about Fit Nation to you. Yes?
Yes. Daniel is doing a series on Friday as well.
Oh,
So
on Friday too.
Monday,
Okay.
Wednesday, Friday. But we've got a series coming out soon, so stay tuned.
Awesome. So, and this is fun. Fit Nation anywhere, anytime. And once you have, some, experience with some of the activities and exercises, you'll start to pick it up for yourself, and you'll just be doing Fit Nation randomly when you need a break from your computer, from the dishes, from the kids, 5 minutes and you've got a Fit Nation break. So it's really awesome. Runners and walkers, let's just do this. Jump in on Daniel's Fit Nation session.
It's Tracy. Oh, sorry. It's Tracy Telford here. The video is, but I'm also with Amanda. I've been doing Pound.
Right.
Yes, which is
the
on
screen.
Thursdays.
There it is. Yes.
Yes.
Which is so much fun. And this
So
is
we do have Thursday Pound with Amanda at 12:30 for anyone's interested too.
Mm-hmm. Very cool.
It's absolutely my favorite new form of fitness. It really is. And I'll tell you what, with our iSpark family, when we were privileged to be traveling around the province and we had any kind of space or time, 10 minutes, Amanda, let's do some Pound. And we'd be out there on the street, we have some fun experiences around that. And next thing you know, people around us are watching and, do you want to join in? Well, sure. It's contagious. It's really so fun. And we've talked now too, just about creating new experiences. So lots of overlap with our iSpark family, many different things, activities going on. The leaders have so many fabulous ideas. And, let's share some of these ideas so that people have, something new going on in various communities. So I wonder, so Tracy, I don't have the list of participants right now, but I wonder at this time, Larry, we've had such a great conversation. Those of you that have been listening, have there been any questions up there in the chat box, Susan, at this point? I think we're okay. I think we've done a good job covering just all kinds of thoughts on how we can stay motivated, understand the situation, the steps we can take to focus on what we can do, not so much on the things that we can't control. And Larry, I thank you so much for joining us today.
Welcome.
Always nice to see you and spend time with you. Everybody out there far and wide, if there's any questions about anything we've talked about, we'll actually PDF the slides and send that out maybe, as well as the recorded version of this webinar. Thank you for all your efforts thus far, and let's keep it going. Okay? Thanks, everybody.